Hey, what's up, Grace? How you feeling today?
Good. How are you?
I'm feeling blessed, madam. Feeling blessed. It is it's a beautiful day. I got to get outside in Atlanta for probably about an hour. I'm feeling blessed. How about you? How's everything going your way?
It's so funny. I feel like I went into like almost Christmas, and I'm like, the deals have to have slowed down. Like taxes are coming out. People must, and it's just like keeps on coming in. And I just right before jumping on, I just took a screenshot of something that I'm like, I'm going to need to work on this tomorrow. So freight doesn't slow down, I guess, especially right now. That's for sure.
That is definitely for sure. I went on a trip this past weekend. My sister, she was able to graduate from UNC Chapel Hill. She is now the first nurse practitioner in my family. So congrats to her. But the trip left me sleepy. I couldn't. I drove all yesterday, and today I needed a nap. And then I woke up with so many things to read, and we just got to keep on going. You can do it though, Grace. You can definitely do it.
Yeah, no, it's I'm definitely blessed, and think right. If there wasn't news, I would have nothing to do with my life. So,
all right. Well, look, it is now 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it is Wednesday. The Transportation and Logistics Clubhouse for the last year has been able to have very, very esteemed guests such as Grace, and I think we've just been leveling up each time. So, Grace, can you please introduce yourself and, just give a little background of, what you've done. And I'm just going to, ask a couple questions from there. OK,
for sure. So we'll keep it freight related, right? So my name is Grace Sharkey. I am currently a staff writer, podcast producer, content in general creator for FreightWaves.com and FreightWaves TV. Prior to this, I actually spent the majority of my last, it'll be almost 10 years now, building a freight brokerage up here in Michigan. So when I graduated college at Michigan State, I joined a startup brokerage. It was 3 of us at the time. And then throughout the past 6-7 years, grew that operation to about 100 employees, about, I'd say, $80 million in revenue. And it was an absolute blast. And I learned a lot along the way. And now I help clearly write the news and dive into a lot of technology, investment, M&A within the space, and just love consulting and love helping people become successful in this industry, because I was just talking to someone the other day, an investor, and he made me laugh because he's like, what even is like a market cap when it comes to logistics? We're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and the better that we all do, the bigger that gets. So, there's a lot of great money out there to be made, a lot of ways to be successful in this industry, and that's why I love it so much.
Okay. All right. So look, when did you add podcaster to the things that you do?
Well, that's why you guys haven't been hearing from me as much. So I have a couple of podcasts now. I wonder is Paul on here right now? No, he's not. So through FreightWaves, I used to be on Transmission, which was a podcast about the automotive supply chain. And just recently, one of our really, really great, amazing contributors to FreightWaves, Andrew Cox, went on to do pretty big things. And I've been able to take over his podcast, Point of Sale. So I focus on retail supply chains, and honestly, when it comes to retail supply, I get really creative with the content that I can touch on. So that's what I do through FreightWaves. And then I'm actually, Paul, who you might have seen here before, him and I have a personal podcast that we do called Gear Down, that comes out usually Friday night, Saturday mornings. where we just kind of talk and we actually have had some really interesting guests, but it's a little bit less businessy, more gritty, as you'd say.
Okay.
But yeah, those are the two right now, and if I can find time, maybe take on another one. There's actually some really interesting stuff I'm working on with FreightWaves right now for the new year. So
awesome.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
I love to hear that. Now, let me just ask this specifically, okay? Because at one point, you had a recurring segment here on the Transportation and Logistics Clubhouse. Was that the precursor to all this podcast stuff?
I love that you say that. I would say so. Yes. I always wanted to.
Yes.
I always wanted to start doing podcast stuff, and thankfully, FreightWaves kind of just threw me into it really quickly, which was really cool. But I think it's something I'm still trying to figure out how to do. I really want to make a more of a and I'd say Paul and I are working on it, but a grittier type of podcast where, and when we did these, it was me and Abby, and it was, reefer is a funny word was our
right
for it. And because it is, and I think this industry is just so funny, and it's got such great meme culture, and at the end of the day, everything delivers, right? If not, it's a claim. But if it doesn't go to claim route, it delivers, and we all move on to the next shipment. And that's why I really think it would be fun to do some type of podcast that's just us making fun of ourselves and making fun of the ins and outs of it. And what other industry can you just have a natural conversation and use the word reefer, load, and
lot lizard, reefer, load, and lot
lizard, within a conversation, and it's not inappropriate. So
exactly. Yeah. No, I hear you. I mean, I think transportation and logistics is definitely one of those industries. It's not stuffy. You can be exactly who you are, and you can grow in any direction because supply chain touches everything. So and
there's so many different titles that I'm slowly realizing. Realizing are just as important. For everyone out there, if you're interested in getting in the trucking industry, if you're good at marketing, that's a huge area this industry is just starting to discover, right?
Correct.
There's so many routes that you can take. If you're legal, right? Claims, laws, how to set up contracts. There's literally any degree you could place into this industry, and that's just why I love it so much.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So look, for you, all right, so we talked about you being a podcaster. We talked about you being a staff writer. And, you kind of alluded to the fact that you were, started with a startup and, you were a freight exec. I want to talk about all these things, but, immediate to you are a staff writer with FreightWaves, and, you write quite a few articles. I mean, do you have an account of how many you've written this year alone?
Oh my God, thank you so much for asking me this. Only because I quite literally looked at it yesterday. I hit my 300th article yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of content.
Yeah, it is actually a lot of content. Maybe too much content. No, it's to the 21st century. It's never too much content, right?
Wow.
No, and it's so funny because it's just, in my head, I'm one a day, but it's definitely that much. And honestly, I probably, by the time I end the year, a full year, it'll probably be closer to 400.
What?
Yeah. And but like I said, there's just so much great news out there, and there's so much information that what I like to really do in my role, right? My beat is technology and investment. And on the surface, a normal conversation about those two topics for most people can just become so boring so quick. Mm-hmm. And so I like to take my personality and try to really make it fun for people, make it, humanize it, help people understand, how easily they could become an investor, or how easily technology could be implemented into your business, and the right ways to do it, and the right ways to market it, and the right ways to catch people's attention. And that's what, like, marketing is like a huge thing that I've just been starting to really dive into, because, you know, I'm actually doing even some freelance writing on the side. And I'm realizing there's like not a lot of people that can take this industry and put it into words that people can digest. So it's there's so much out there that's news and entertainment that can be made in this space, and that's why I really enjoy what I'm doing, and that's why the 300 articles just went by so fast, honestly.
Right. Wow. So do you have the ability to choose any topic, or is there a team of you guys where there's some tabs in a pool and you just pull it out, like, oh, Grace is going to get technology this week, or, you know, this person is going to get, you know, that new merger that just happened? Is that the situation, or you have free domain?
Great question. I would say one of my favorite things about working at FreightWaves in general is the freedom of it, in terms of not just what is available for you to write about, but the opinions that you want to put out there and the content that you want to create. The funny thing is, it's like most of the time when I come up with an idea for either an article or like a new series, I really try to make sure I have an idea of how I want to attack it, because I know I'm going to get the yes. Like,
okay.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's one of those things where it's like, you better be ready. You better be ready for what you wish for, right? Because it's going to come quick. No, usually we each have our own individual beats, and I think we all respect the way that each of us writes about certain topics. I can't even think of a time where we've someone maybe has fought over. If anything, it's like we'll work together on certain, like right now, the Central, FreightWaves was the first news source out of, we're talking even the Wall Street Journal cited us. We're the first ones to call the Central freight lines closing.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Right? And so what's really cool about that is we get to work as a team to figure out, okay, what does this mean for the parcel community? What does this mean for technology? What does this mean for brokers? We get to all kind of contribute to the same narrative in different ways. And I really love Clarissa Haas, who wrote about that, because if you look at her original article, she even puts in there, here's all the people. Dooner helped her out with it. A couple other people that helped facilitate that conversation. But most of the time, if it comes, especially with being technology so new in this space, if it's technology, especially if it's an investment in technology, especially if it's new technology,
right?
It's usually a, hey, Grace, this one's going to be for you. So, it's very free. If for some reason, for instance, I don't really write too deep into automated vehicles or electric vehicles. That's usually Alan Adler. So a lot of times I'll shoot him an email. Hey, this seems interesting. Do you want to attack this? If it's something he doesn't have time for, then I'll do it. So, it's a really interesting team effort. And it's just funny because I never written before going into this, never was a journalist. Just really love to try to make my opinions and views heard through writing. But when I started, that was my biggest fear. So I'm like, okay, well, I remember day one, we're going to sit down some meetings and stuff like that. I'm like, well, there's a couple things that I could write about. Can I start? And they're like, well, yeah.
Wow, yeah.
So I love the freedom, and I love being able to meet new companies and meet new people and say, this is a really interesting story you're telling. I want to shed some light on it. So yeah.
Okay. Well, look, you said a lot just then, and I wanted to talk about a couple things, but one of the most important things is you went from being a freight exec, where that was what you were doing, to now, kind of transitioning to writing. And you said this is really your first time putting your work out there for everybody to see. How did you know you could write? Like, what was something that reassured you that like you were very skilled in this area?
So, a lot of my, well, first thing is when I was in college, I was in more of like a liberal arts. I was getting ready to go to law school, honestly. So most of my assignments or work was not tests. It was actually like 20, 30-page papers, stuff like that. So I knew I could analytically write, like I could write for a topic. And I think what really helps me in my writing now is that most of my current time when I was at Fifth Wheel was chief of strategy. And part of that is really being able to get people to understand how things need to be done, how that strategy needs to play out. And so a lot of the times when I would be looking into new projects or looking into different types of systems or different ways of operating as a business as a whole, I would have to put that on paper so I could, help people understand our meeting, say, and so it'll lead to this, and I think that's really what helped me going into this is like I had a good idea of how to help people understand the outcome of things. But I think the biggest thing in general, and when I took this job, I was a huge fan of FreightWaves to begin with. Like I had been watching their stuff since they were a blog. And now they've got, literally, we have 24 hours of content going at all times. And I remember telling Kevin when I started, I'm like, I really want to do this job. But when I do this job, I want a lot of the technology writing, you could tell almost came from like a marketing perspective. It was a little fluffy, like a lot of like best in class. And it's like, what does that even mean? Because trust me, there is a huge difference between like what a 3-person brokering entity needs compared to a 200-person brokerage business. And that's where I really try when I write to figure out, okay, I want that person with the 3 people to finish this article and say, you know what? I don't need this, but it's something to aspire to. And I want that 200-person organization to say, this is exactly what I need. And that's what's great is like, I've had that time and that history of being in that spot, in that reader spot and saying, okay, like, what could this do for me? Is this something I need now? And I'm able to take both sides. And, it's funny, like a lot of what I do is working with companies. A lot of times they'll come back and say, could you change this word around, or could we use this instead? This kind of that like corporate kind of stuff. And there's multiple times where I'll come back and I'll tell them, I completely understand why you want that word changed. The average human being gets lost when they hear that word, right? Or if they hear this, that's going to make a sale 10 times faster than this is, right? So that's kind of like where I really enjoy is like, so I just actually started this new series called Meet the Investor, where I do just a Q&A sit down with some of the biggest investors in our industry.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Wow. And the last one I did was with Ben Gordon, and I don't know if any of you guys know who that is, but he's one of the first investors, one of the big guys behind XPO and where it is now. And he Cambridge Capital is the company that he put together. He's a huge guy in the industry, and there was a part of his story where he wanted to kind of edit it, and I told him, I go, Ben, I'm being selfish a little bit right here. I want to keep your original quote because the gravitas behind it hits the audience 10 times more. And it's like, I remember sitting there and being like, you ballsy chick. Like, you're gonna just tell him, you're gonna tell it, but it's like, that's why I love my job, because people, like, they hear you out, and they're willing to say, you know what, you've had this experience, you have these people that follow you and understand you, I'm willing to hear you out. And that's what I love working with all these different types of people and being able to tell their story, not just to tell it, but so that it's like really heard and understood.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Oh, that is awesome. I love the fact that you're one, everybody knows that FreightWaves is an authority. People hear FreightWaves and they look in that direction. They want to learn more. So I know that just having that, that platform, you're going to get some access to some amazing investors. And I just say, I charge you with being yourself, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To continue to do that, because, at the end of the day, a lot of people are used to the ones closest to them operate in a certain way. So, just be yourself. And I'm pretty sure you're going to inspire them to do some new things themselves as well. So,
thank you. That's
no doubt. No doubt. So look, let me ask this question. We talked about the podcasting, and we talked about, just your transition into writing. Do you mind if we talk about your experience at Fifth Wheel?
Oh yeah, no, that's no problem.
All right, cool. So look, you started there as a startup. It was only 3 of you guys. Your first title was it like an account? I don't know what it was.
Yeah, it's like an account executive or something like that, like sales representative.
Yeah, something like that.
Account representative, yeah.
Yeah. What was something that you learned in that position that you feel like maybe still helps you today?
Wow, really good. This is fun. I love this. Going back in time a little bit. What's interesting to me is and I was pretty good at this. In my college job, I used to do fundraising, and we were the people the students that called you at 7:00 at night during dinner asking for money.
Yes, ma'am. Georgia State has a whole slew of them, and
yes.
Look, I need to tell Georgia State they need to go ahead and change the number that they're calling from. We recognize it, okay?
Right?
It's the same thing.
Same here. And I take the calls because I like to judge them. But no. So, and it's the same thing I really learned there, but almost more in freight is when you're cold calling people, or when you're calling, new clients or companies. Every company needs this. It's not, you're not selling a product that isn't needed by each company. They absolutely need your help. And for me, that was always in the back of my head. It was never will they say no? It was just more of, when will they say yes? And how can I slowly get in there? And I kind of went at it the same way I did fundraising. I ended up at the end of fundraising getting to the higher lists, but the reason I got up to those lists is because I always knew at the end of the day if I got on the phone with alumni, I would get $25. I could guarantee get them to give me $25 on a debit card over the phone. And it was just something I knew I could do. It's my script is always, it's just five hot and readies over the next 3 months. That's not right, and you can't say no to that. What do you
it's only 5 hot and readies.
Yeah, you know what I mean. But what if you spent $25 on that's much worse? But and so I've always kind of taken that approach, even with calling for freight and calling new customers. It's let me try one. Just give me one. Because I always knew I was a good person. I was going to be someone that they could connect to and that they could trust with their shipments. I just needed to get in there and do that one shipment for them. So that was the big thing I always took was every person that you're going to talk to on the phone needs your help. There's a few here and there that maybe call the wrong number, or they don't control it, or maybe a vendor routed, but a lot of times, supplies are coming in somehow, or, maybe they're just receiving and they're not shipping them personally. There's always some way that I could try to connect. So that's the biggest thing for me is I never went into it this is a dead lead until I could just really prove that it was dead. And you would be surprised. I mean, there's at some point I remember because I was the only one that answered the email, the first load I ever did for Kraft was on Christmas Eve. And so that shows you, it was glue. It was glue for the boxes. But which I guess they really needed on Christmas Eve. But, it shows you, it doesn't matter the size of the company. They just, if you can be persistent in a good way and show them that you're just a good person, that at a point they probably will say yes. And I think this is something that, on the other end, like the hardest part, I think, of this industry is scaling, because you have to know that if you're persistent enough and you can really prove yourself worthy, that yes will come. Are you prepared for it? Right.
Right.
Like, am I prepared for crack to be like, good job on that shipment, you're moving all of our glue? No, no, I'm not.
Yeah. I agree, man. You hit some very, very good points right there. And, the funny thing is I did want to talk to you about some of the things that you naturally went to. But even with that scaling question, it's just like, how do you, this is for it's for the not only the brokers who are listening in, but even the dispatchers. You mentioned cold calling and being able to convey that, you are in fact a good person through, to get through that gatekeeper to the person that can actually make the decision. Did you, what were some techniques probably that you learned, to get them on your side? Is that just relating or like what happened? How'd you learn that?
Love this question. I think I learned throughout all of my like cold calling career. I think I definitely learned this more in college, is that at the end of the day, and I think this is really good advice for people to realize, even like in one-on-one conversations, we are all living our own lives. We all have our own issues at home. We all have, things that we're self-conscious about. We all have problems and positives and things to be joyous for. So any conversation that I ever go into, whether it's honestly even business or personal, you have to know that you're talking to a human being who has their own life, who has certain things. So when you talk to someone on that first call and they're kind of grouchy, like, think to yourself, what makes me grouchy, right? Like, what probably a boss ticked him off that day, or their kid didn't get to school on time, or, they just spilled coffee all over it. Like, and people they're rarely transparent about their feelings. So for me, I think one big thing is like to always go into a conversation knowing that you're talking to a human being. That being said, whenever I cold called, if you ask people that would sit around me, they would tell you this is so true, because whenever I talk to someone new, I would always have this line where, like, it's a line, and I hate saying it like it's like a pitch or something. If anyone ever said, how are you doing back? Like, you call, like, hey, how's your day going? Good. How is your day going? I would always kind of pause and I'd say, oh my goodness, I'm doing pretty well, but honestly, you were like the first person to ask me. Usually it was like the 8th person to ask me. But like, I always say that because you feel it in their voice. They kind of sit there for a second. They're like, oh my God, even though you're the 12th broker that's called me today, you just reminded me you're also a human being. And no one has said, how are you doing today? Right. And so it got them to immediately kind of like relax. And I always just tried to stay away from talking about like business and freight until I got to know them kind of as a person and figured out what their role was. Because especially like a lot of these gatekeepers, right? Like these secretaries that you talk to on those initial first calls, like, let's be honest, and if anyone's been a secretary, this is true. Secretaries know more than anyone else. They know even if the boss is the one that makes the call, they're going to tell you how the boss's favorite chocolate, or they're going to say, yeah, the boss makes the call, but if you can get Jeffrey down in sales to agree, he'll get the boss to say yes no matter what. So I just really try to treat those people really nice. Like, I'm the type of person, maybe I didn't get a shipment out of you on the first or second call, but that third call, when I called back and I immediately said, like, oh my God, how is your niece doing? And that was whenever I made notes, I'm always like, writing down like little things. I don't know if anyone watches The Office, but like Michael Scott had that like book of like all of their customers and like small things to say to them. Like, that was my goal. Was like, okay, how can I how can I remember this person in a different way that has like absolutely, like nothing to do with freight, right? Like don't call them and say, oh yeah, Kathy with the 30 loads to Mexico. No, like no one wants to be talked to that way. Instead, hey, Kathy, remember last week when you told me to start adding this spice to my soup? It went well. Like that's the type of stuff that is going to get you so far, and that is going to really build a relationship. So I would say, honestly, in all types of sales, that is key. Like, get to know these people as a person. But for me, I always just like I said, remember that like everyone's human, and that if you can get people to realize like you're just another human being too out here doing a job, you're going to find life is a lot easier, and people are way more forthcoming with what you need and what you're trying to get from those calls.
I think that is excellent advice.
Thank you.
You've seen it on all levels now in your career, especially with, negotiating contracts, negotiating rates, setting a strategy for an organization, having to manage folks, all these things. You've seen it. And in my experience, it's that exact same thing of, we all have a title of something that we're doing for work, but we're people first. And if you can be personable, if you can be compassionate, if you can meet me as, an individual and, respect what I got going on, we can have a blast. Like, what's happening? So I agree.
That stuff is going to help you in so many different ways. That's not just like the sales of your business. Like, what was really interesting to me is I was at Fifth Wheel during like when COVID first happened, right? Mm-hmm. And like this stuff is so helpful even on the accounting side when you're able to build really great relationships with the accounts payable teams of your customers, like making those phone calls and then saying, listen, like, Grace, we're not paying anyone for 60 days. Like, getting people to like be open with that. And it was like such an interesting time for me to like learn about how the capital structure of various customers, but just, seeing who was honest and who was saying, as I remember, we had a few good customers, they're like, we need to see how this plays out. Can you give us an extra 60 days on everything owed? And seeing who paid in 45 and seeing, and that's the type of stuff where even look at claims, right? Like if you can become really close with people, there's times where you're going to be able to talk to someone on the phone and they're going to say, you know what, Grace, between you and me, that stuff's always loaded bad. Like it's, you're going to get information out of people more than you expect. And I'm just starting to get into like a little bit more of the investigative journalism pieces and things like that. And that is such a strong skill in that area to be able, like Clarissa, everyone right now should go to FreightWaves.com, type in Clarissa Hawes. She makes funny because she's like, you're my mouthpiece. She doesn't like talking with people, but she's an incredible investigative journalist. And the things that she knows, the stuff she hears from carriers, like they trust her so much. And I'll tell you right now, she will not open her mouth until she has everything confirmed. Like even there's times where I'm like, ooh, can you tell me like what's coming up next? Like I'll try to, I'll be like, just tell me. I mean, we work together. I'm going to read it anyways. And she's like, nope, I can't let my sources down. I can't. And it's, I almost get teary eyed thinking about it, but she really taught me like that skill helps even in this job, being able to gain people's trust and have people understand like your word is your word.
Right. Yeah, that's another huge thing in business is, keeping your word. And yes. I think that sounds a little bit too simplistic for, the gravity. But no, it's just that if you say it, do it, please. And if you do that, I'm pretty sure that a lot more people, actually, if you do that, you will then trust yourself. And then you'll get more self-confidence. And then that's going to spew out to being, confidence as to what you're projecting to other people, which guess what? You're going to get more opportunities because now you're confident that you can do all of it. So, I agree. But it's very simple. just keep your word. And I say that to myself too, because sometimes if I'm not a good steward of writing things down and keeping a good calendar, I might forget something, and I'll be all apologetic. But
right?
But
that's the point. It's like, how many times have you guys been like afraid to call a customer and tell them that thing's not going to deliver? You don't think they've heard that 400,000 times? They want to know that you have a pair to go and tell them to begin with, and then you tell them the truth. Yes, exactly. And I would highly suggest bringing in a plan of action behind that. But it's surprising to me. I can't tell you how many times I would, as I started getting deeper in my career, and reps would come to me and say, like, we really messed this one up, or like, this is going wrong. It's like, what has anyone even just tried calling them and telling them, and then like we fix it, and then like I said, that it delivered. And never has there been a time where I don't know, what's the worst case, like they come and murder you. Like, there's never been a time where it's gone so south. I can't even think of a time where there was a problem and the customer truly, like, we lost someone because of it, because we're so open and upfront about, this is what's going on, this is how it's going to get fixed. And it's your product, you deserve to know where it is and what's happening with it. And to be honest with you, I did a lot of oversized stuff, a lot of stuff where, trust me, if it got damaged, no one was not finding out about it. So a lot of times it's more of like, your customer's going to see something if we, so I might as well tell you now.
Exactly. I mean, and that's the one thing I say that helps me as in my role as a logistics consultant. I own Atlanta Dispatch LLC. Is if something is not going to happen, I have to be, mindful of the broker or the person that's in charge of getting this thing moved. I have to think about how they're going to get it moved if I can't do it, and give them enough time and, just the opportunity to do that type of stuff. So I think that goes a long way with just not sitting on it. But acting as soon as you find out you can't do what you said you were going to do. So.
Exactly. And once you do that a couple times, like I used to have a steel customer where I would listen, my driver dropped, I'm going to give it back to you. I'm still working on it and I guarantee I can recover it. But you don't need to get screwed in this situation. So if someone else beats me to getting it recovered, so be it. You know how many times, like that just builds so much strong trust. Like, your customer is going to know. I can't tell you how many times they come back to me and said, you know what, don't even worry about it. Just find someone today or tomorrow and keep it moving. So
Right. Yes,
I
love it too. Thank you so much for re-emphasizing that, because there are a lot of people, that are new to this, and hearing these conversations about transparency might help them out in the future. So,
it'll save you the headache. Like, it
will.
You don't want to live the lie anyways. I can't tell. Like, there's been times where a rep or someone has lied, and it's like you're trying to problem solve it, but then you're like, well, we can't say that because we told them this happened. So just be open and honest. It's so much easier.
I agree. So look, I know that you've been privy to learning a lot about a lot of new companies, tech related or whatever, just in this space. Do you feel as though there are some new companies that are going to be making some huge waves over the next couple, years? Maybe they got started, and I'm not going to say it has to be this year, but any new companies that. Sorry about that. Are there any? I kind of went out, but I was just basically asking: are there any new companies that are going to be that you're on the lookout for?
Definitely. Did you guys just have Text Locate on here? Did you just have Ryan on here last week?
We did. I saw that they went to FreightWaves. Yeah, we did.
Yes. No, that's a big one. I really love everything he's doing. Especially, I've got a special place in my heart for freight technology companies that come from people with really great freight technology backgrounds. Like his time with Blue Grace and stuff. Blue Grace is a really great, like they've got really great technology as a whole. So, I think everything that he's doing is awesome. And the reason why I really like his company is because on the surface, right, you're figuring out where drivers are. But there's so many different levels like you could take his technology between, helping people find loads back to the original destination, between, optimizing your overall track and trace team, being able to problem solve. There's so many different ways that you could use that system. I mean, even down to like theoretically, like even just sending all the drivers you ever worked with like a happy holidays like message. It's a really interesting way of communicating with drivers. So I'm a huge fan of him, and I need to follow up with him too because he's doing some really great stuff. What's an interesting one for me is there's a couple companies I've written about in the past between Orderful is one of them. There's these group of companies that are making it easier for shippers and carriers to work together through API or EDI connections, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm sure a lot of you on this call, you've either gotten to the point where you've talked to some of these larger companies and they say, how we work is you need to, integrate into our system, or we need to integrate into yours in order to tender over the loads that you win. And there's companies that are making that transaction so much easier for smaller companies to invest in than the past. The best way that I can really, I had the same actually conversation with Project 44, who does this type of work too. They're a visibility company, so they help their customers, a lot of retailers, visualize where their freight is and where their products and raw goods are at any given point. And I had a really good conversation with their chief growth officer about a decade ago, right? Let's say you wanted to start a business. Mm-hmm. You had to figure out how you're going to market yourself. You had to usually hire someone to set up like a point of sale system. You had to figure out like if let's say you wanted to design t-shirts, you had to figure out where you're going to get the t-shirt supplies from, how you're going to design it, the actual print and presser, right, in order to create a shirt. Let's say you wanted to do that today. You could get a website up and running within an hour. You could get your social media campaigns going within an hour. You could have you could get, I can't even think of what it's called now. You could get your payment systems up and running in less than an hour. Like, isn't that, it's an insanely quick hyper growth of the access to starting a business is completely doable and reachable, right? That barrier of entry is completely gone. Like anyone can do these things now, and you can do it for less than a couple $100. Right. And that's where these like different integrator companies are coming in, and they're making it so much simpler for a company with 6 trucks to integrate their systems into Walmart within an hour. And now you're moving for Walmart. Like, right. And if you went back like 5 years ago, that was extremely difficult. If you wanted to work with Walmart, you had to get someone on your team who could create a EDI connection, or you hired an integrator to do it for you, and that process alone takes time to figure out who you want to trust with that. And then after a month or two, it might be up and finally running. And now there's people that can get that stuff going for you and that quick. And I'm not saying there's no need for brokers or anything like that, but it's just incredibly interesting that it's getting so much easier for trucking companies, dispatchers, right, or just anyone to be able to see what freight is visibly out there without having to go to a load board, without having to have this single source. And I think that's sometimes what really frustrates me about like load boards in general is like, they understand their power. Like they're that barrier of entry for a lot of small and medium-sized players. And now it's getting so much easier to be able to integrate into these systems and work with such larger companies because of these like data integrators that now exist. And in our industry. So that's like, it is kind of like a deeper level of technology that might go over people's heads a little bit, because I definitely am probably just ranting right now. But it's, Orderful is a company that's really doing really great with it right now. I've wrote about them in the past, and I have people in this industry that have told me, like, no, those people are legit, and they literally had changed my business within, I'm talking like 2 hours.
Oh, that is awesome to hear. Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
So those are like some of my favorite technologies, and the same thing, you see it with trucking companies like Cloud Trucks is what I've written about a lot in the past, or who was the new one? AI Fleet. These companies that are just basically saying, like, we're going to make all the tools necessary to be a really powerful trucking company. And then you come here and you're going to be able to take off like that. I think it's just so cool. Anything that just makes it so much easier to enter an industry that's so scary and involves so much capital, is just thrilling to me, because that's what we need. We need people who think they can't do this to join this industry to make it more fun and more innovative. So it's kind of like, that's where I'm at right now with like the things I'm obsessed with.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for mentioning those companies. I think the biggest surprise to me right now is Project 44. And, of course, they're huge now. They're over $1 billion in valuation. But, I still feel as though they came kind of out of nowhere. And when they started attaching themselves to all those RMIS registrations, people, they're asking, hey, who's your current ELD provider? And all of these things about, basically what they do, which is, they're a visibility firm. Now I think they're transitioning though, right? Because did you cover the fact that they just purchased that company that does last mile? Was that you?
Yes, yep. It was Convey.
Yeah. So I feel like they're changing, and you mentioned even load boards being, a place where people go get freight. I don't know, I don't know what it's Project 44 is, what they want to do. My bad. Go ahead.
No, I just love that you brought this up, because, so my first Meet the Investor interview was with, one of the first guys who's literally a year younger than me, who invested in P44, and God knows what he's worth now. But I kind of told him this. I go, the last couple press releases I've gotten from you guys, you have outspokenly, almost to the point where I'm surprised you haven't italicized the words, you do not want to become a broker.
Right.
So it's like I told him, I was like, it's kind of, if it smells like, if it looks like a duck and like acts like a duck, it's a duck. So like, what's happening? And this is the same conversation like I had with him, where he was like, it's not about us. We don't want to facilitate any of the decision making, right? Which is really what a broker does. They take the load, they figure out, okay, who's the best possible person to move this? We don't want any of that. We don't want that on our back. We're not trying to do that. Their goal is kind of the same thing I was just reiterating, was like, we want to be able to get every party, whether it's the shipper, carrier, broker, all of the technological support that they need in order to grow their own business. I totally get what you mean by like Convey. Well, then why would you buy Convey? What you have to understand for Convey, like they're still working within their own entity. In order for the systems and the automation that P44 is working with to truly work, they need massive data sets. And an area that they're kind of missing right now, that not so much in Europe, but definitely I'd say more in the US, is exactly what Convey moves, right?
Yes.
So in order to build out the intelligence of their system, they need that data churning into their brain as much as possible. In order to start, you can't really build solutions for final mile until you have $4 billion of final mile data. And so that's like more of how you want to look at that. It's like, okay, cool. So in order for you to get as close to that data and that end consumer delivery, you needed to quite literally purchase this in order to do that. And, what's interesting too is like, most of P44's, purchases, whether it's like Clearwater or, even the workings they've had with like Lineage, most of them are backed up by some type of like IP as well, right? Like so I would not be surprised if I dove into some of like the patents and stuff that Convey has, if there's not some really great intelligence patents behind it that they're also buying. Because that's what's really kind of interesting too, is like, when they bought, is it Lineage? No, it was Clear Metal. Part of when they bought Clear Metal, they also attained all their IP. And so part of that was like, the way to, track a shipment in areas that aren't accessible by GPS, right? Like, how do you do the math to figure out where that product is? Like, how do you track a route for someone in India where there's no roads?
Right.
So it's like, that's a lot. When it's interesting when you start looking into their deals more. It's less about like, oh, good, they now have a way to get into last mile. It's like, no, now we know how last mile operates and how it operates well, right? Because Convey's growing so fast. Well, your data is probably going to be really clean. We're probably going to learn a lot from it, and we're going to be able to help other shippers now in the future with our systems complete a last mile delivery in a better way.
You know what? I like everything that you said, and, for the insights that you're bringing from, your discussions with this organization, I hear it.
Yeah.
I want to offer this because it sounds like they're moving to full integration of 100% visibility from manufacturer, which would be, overseas, to it being tracked real time on any ship vessel because of their acquisition of that other company that does exactly that, to them now bringing it back to the United States. You mentioned, you threw this out there. You said load board. I didn't even think about load board before this conversation, but it seems as though their platform would be not that they need to be a brokerage, but end to end load board of everything that's going on with their end customers in mind, and they're just tracking all the information in between. You got to be set up with them in order to see this stuff. I don't think that's too strange or far-fetched to be the future of what they have going on, but they're definitely making some power plays. They're definitely putting themselves in the position to do whatever they want.
Yeah, and it's, the funny thing is I think, like, let's say they got to that point where they could full on make a load board. I don't think it would work anything like what you see from like DAT or Truck Stop. It would be more of like, what's your shipment? You put it in there, and then it says, here's the carriers you call. And it's not a list of like, that's constantly updating of how long that carrier, like, oh, it's been on the load, the carrier's been available for 14 hours. It'll be like, call Joe Schmo or call Jill, and they will be available and they will take the load.
Right. Yeah. So they have visibility onto everything. They're integrated into these ELDs. Yeah. I'm interested to see where they go. And I was thinking about it. I was like, man, if they were selling stock right now, that'd be the first stock I'd buy. Because
and I think they will get to that point. I don't know when. I can't, and didn't even want to say I can't say when because I don't know when. But it's something they've openly expressed that that's at some point a route they will take. And don't you love it being able to like learn about these companies and also invest in them as well? It's so much fun.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that's our generation now, to have the insights of, what's going on and leverage it. So yeah, I'm just trying to do that in my life over here. So yeah. But look, did you have anything things that you wanted to just touch on that we haven't already talked about? Maybe things that you think are pressing, or, any message that you wanted to share. And you don't have to. You don't feel pressed to go right now. I have more questions. I have more questions. But just so that is something that you might be thinking about in the background of your mind. But also, you mentioned this thing earlier with your colleague and your organization, but your colleague specifically talking about Central Freight Lines. And, that's 96 years of being in business, and it's sad to see it go. The same thing with Dillon Transport earlier in the year. It's, I just hate to see these household brands just, topple over like that. Just recently, I don't know, I might have been at Chick-fil-A or something. And my God. I looked across the street and I saw 2 Central Freight Line box trucks delivering to some building. And I was just like, I need to call them just to see. Maybe they have some box truck opportunities for my carriers. And, just to get this news, it's just, it's tough out here. So, you just gotta operate, with sound business decisions. And,
what's interesting about this one is, like, I think, and this is actually more true for LTL carriers just because of the way that their trucks and everything are used and the investment needed in them. One is, if you've seen a Central truck at all recently, they've never been pretty. They haven't been pretty for the last couple of years, which means that the people, the decision makers, are openly saying, "Hey, don't get new trucks, don't get new trailers. There's no reason to." This one I feel like hits a little bit differently than like Covenant from a couple of years ago, because it almost seemed a little bit more planned. If you notice, like in a lot of our articles we're writing about right now, I think we just put out there, Estes is planning on picking up most of the drivers. A lot of the equipment's already been taken care of. I think it was a couple months ago that they've already gotten their like warehousing and assets all are taken care of. I've, do your own research on this, but it sounds like the owner of Central, this is kind of like his, I wouldn't say forte, but he's known to kind of like just let these businesses kind of fizzle out. So it sounds like to me that it's been a little bit more, just kind of like more businessy compared to like when Covenant happened and no one saw it coming and there's a bunch of fraud behind it as well, and it was a huge disaster. I think the other thing that's positive for me too is that most of these drivers are going to end up going to work for better companies, better run companies. They're going to have Estes is a great company to work for. They're going to have a better time there. I mean, right now, right? Like, we need drivers. I'm happy that this is happening at a point where they're more likely going to find a job.
A better job.
Better job, yes. Where Covenant happened and we are going through Covenant was the first of many that went bankrupt, right? So you had drivers who couldn't go and find a job tomorrow. So that's what I'll say about this one. It is sad, but I think if you look at Clarissa's article on it, her updated article, she even went on, they had and we all know this because we all chose them when they popped up on our LTL software. They were really bad at pricing. They're really bad at figuring out how to price for a profit. And, I think it ended up coming out that about 70% of their business was brokerage, which is kind of scary, right? Like, most LTL carriers, like, they have really great contracts with actual shippers, right? So to have that large of your business is made up of people who are probably choosing you because you're the cheapest is no bueno, not so good. So I just think it shows you what happens when you're focused just on price and you don't build a team of people that know what they're doing and want to continue growing a business and scaling a business. They just got and another piece of it too is it sounds like common to like, remember this happened in New England Motor Freight, right? Some of its biggest customers that weren't brokers, well, it depends on how you want to look at them, but someone like Amazon, they're constantly asking you to do it for less and for less and for less, and at some point you can't.
Right.
You see that happen with a lot of times with trucking companies that become too heavy in automotive. Like every year, PAM, right? I think it was PAM Transportation ended up, no, Falcon. That's what it was. Falcon Transportation ended up going out of business because they were just they had no brokerage and all of their stuff was wrapped up in auto, and auto just is the same way. Cut your price, cut your price, cut your price. And then you end up in a bad situation where you're making no money. And I think Falcon had a couple of helicopter fees on them for messing up a few shipments, and now you can't work anymore. So I think the biggest lesson that people need to see when they see this happen is back to what I was saying, is scaling, right? Are you too heavy in an area? Are you spending too much literal sweat equity in a customer that gives you nothing back? I'm trying to think of how this is phrased, and there's probably some really smart business person that's listening right now and is like, this girl writes for a living. But I think it's like, if you take the bottom 20% of your customers, something like that, and likely you could drop all that 20% and focus on the 80%, and you would be able to make more money. It's just people get wrapped up. You see this happen, like we're all salespeople, right? Where you have this new customer and you think it could be something big, but they're not, and they have 2 shipments a month, and every time you do it, it takes like 5 hours, and it's like, well, what if I took all the time I spend that customer and put it towards a customer that gives me 80 shipments a month? Guaranteed you're probably going to get 10 more, and you're never going to remember the other one. It's really important that businesses keep an eye on how heavy they are in a certain customer, because you always want to plan for the worst, right? You always want to plan, especially in a brokerage. You're seeing this all over the place right now, which is like, this is my other favorite topic, and it just happened. Cisco just did it today. That's what I was reading when I was about to jump on here. You have all these shippers now that are buying their own logistics companies. So let's say that your brokerage book is 80% Cisco, and Cisco comes in tomorrow and says, sorry, all the business now is going to go through the logistics company we bought. Your business is done. So it's smart. It's just like how you would operate your own personal investments, and anything else in life. You want to make sure that your business is split up evenly, so that if something goes awry, or a certain retailer goes under, or a certain industry flips, that you're prepared to eat that.
Correct. Agreed. So what you closed with was diversifying your portfolio. Yes. The 80-20 rule is the Pareto.
Yes, there you
principle.
Go. Thank you. Thank you. I was trying to remember it, but I'm drinking a glass of wine right now.
It's all good.
I can't remember. But yes, the 80-20. There we go.
Yeah. No, I mean, everybody knew exactly where you were. And yes. So I definitely agree. And I guess just bringing my own business into this is, making sure that I have some pretty good opportunities. I can't lie to you. I have a lot of carriers that feel great about, the things that they are able to get through my relationships. However, it's a conversation I have with my wife. It's just like, well, look, if something goes crazy, I need to make sure that my business is diversified so that I'm not too affected by one situation. So, that's just, that's just not putting all your eggs in one basket, to say it a little bit more colloquially.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, if there were any questions for Miss Grace, please go ahead and raise your hand or shoot me messages. Just let me know. But, Grace, I did want to just say thank you so much for joining us. You are, you have definitely done a lot for this industry. Even for this clubhouse, the Transportation and Logistics Clubhouse had its very, 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 very first feature, and it was due to Miss Grace Sharkey. She wrote about us, and I was so happy. I was so happy. Oh. I was so appreciative. I am so appreciative. But yeah, so she is definitely always welcomed on the stage, and we look forward to growing with you as a staff writer and as a podcaster. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that you were very, very appreciated. And, anything I can do to help you, I am all the way there. So, you just let me know.
I guess if I could, I'd like to shamelessly plug myself.
Go for it.
Yeah, I would say, big things for me is, if you go to my Twitter or Instagram, go to my link tree and add me on all social media. You can easily access from my link tree all of my past articles, and get access to the Point of Sale podcast, and different things that I'm doing as well. Subscribe, subscribe, like, all that jazz. And then the other thing is I, not only do I write a lot about investment technology in the space, I also am extremely privileged to be able to do a weekend, column called The Logbook, where I dive into more of human interest stories. So, just different ways that either companies are giving back to their communities or how people are, starting their own, for instance, like one of my good friends, Melissa, who has her own Safety for Her. It's a clothing line of really cool, like, vest and leggings, everything female drivers would want. Just those kind of human interest stories where it's kind of more lighthearted and more down to earth. So if you guys are ever, volunteering or are trying to start an initiative or trying to give back to the community, feel free to reach out to me, because I'm always looking to bring more voices out through that platform. And honestly, just if you're ever interested in even telling your story, I just always assume that everyone is like me and I'm completely obsessed with FreightWaves, but we have a really great show called What the Truck, that details a lot of really interesting trucking companies, and Timothy Dooner, we call him Dooner, is always looking for different trucking companies to highlight, and he's gotten some great ones I know that have been on here before. She Trucking, we did the She Trucking, got a huge spotlight on his show, and we're just, we really honestly are trying to work towards bringing a more diverse voice to FreightWaves as well. And because there's so many different people that are in this industry, and there's so many different people that are also investing in this industry. It's not just all the people that you assume would be in it, and we want to make sure that everyone feels like they are a part of it and that they're heard. And that's why, I did write that article, because I wanted people to understand that there is such a underground, group of hardcore transportation nerds like myself that are either, in the trucks or building their own brokerages that are moving just as much freight. Trust me, I'm enough. This is not where I'm going to air anyone out, but there are technology companies out there, guys, who have the same exact revenue that you do. Do not be afraid of some of these investment numbers. When you see that someone's gotten a $20 million investment, trust me, oh my God, please trust me that does not mean that they have $20 million in revenue. So for all of you out there, it's honestly, it's insane. Valuations are crazy these days. I know that's a whole nother episode that we could get into, Jory, but just realize that whenever you see things are just undisclosed or terms are undisclosed, it's because these guys have just as much business as you do. So do not ever think that maybe your business is small, because trust me, there's people out there that are, hey, here's a perfect example. Uber still doesn't make profit. So, realize when you guys are building these great companies and you're affording better childcare for your kids, and you're getting your parents' vehicles, and you're paying off your school loans, you're doing a lot more than some of these people out here that I write about on a daily basis are. So never think that your business is small, because it never is. And like I said, you'll scale. That's how this industry works.
Hey, thank you so much for that. And we appreciate, again, everything you do. Shout out to Sheree at She Trucking.
Yes, love her.
Yeah, and if there are any other, spots that, I know a lot of people who are moving and shaking in this industry, Grace. So just holler at me. I'm more than happy with, giving some folks to highlight, because, I learn from a lot of people, and, I would love to see them, get their flowers in other capacities.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, that's pretty much it. I mean,
awesome.
Joining us. If there were questions, you guys feel free to raise your hand or shoot me the message. But outside of that, I feel as though we are going to be wrapping. Grace?
Yeah,
again.
and I need to do this more too, so let's work together on trying to make this maybe a quarterly thing, so I can, answer any questions people have, or at least give insight of where the industry is going and things that we're working on. So anything I can do to help, I'm here.
All right, perfect. Well, it looks like somebody raised their hand.
Nice.
Let's see. Is it still up? Okay.
I do see it, yes.
Right.
Good
so
evening.
look.
Good evening.
Hey.
Good evening, Jory.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey, how are you all?
Great.
Good.
I have a question for you. I'm just kind of curious about the writing aspect of your position. Do you have, I should say, a certain amount of articles that you have to write in a certain time period? Or, is there I didn't hear you. I hope I didn't miss it, but
no, you're fine. No, it's honestly there's not there. I mean, if I remember right on paper, it was something around like 3 to 5 a week or so. But we actually got a new editor-in-chief this past year, and he was editor-in-chief for PGA Tour, worked for ESPN for such a really long time. So of course when he joined, it was at the same time I was joining, and it was like, I'll teach you to write, you teach me to write. Like really, it was really funny. And he is outspoken on that. We really try to push quality of our work compared to just trying to churn out as much as possible. I would say that I churn out as much as I do because there's just so much going on right now with technology and just investments within supply chain in general. But no, it's really if you find this as an interesting topic, write about it and make sure it's, has some good content behind it. But no, there's definitely, there hasn't been a point where anyone on our staff is you're definitely not doing enough. If anything, I notice sometimes personally when I actually slow down and take a little bit more time that my articles even get better. So that's where I'm at right now, a little bit less rushy and a little bit more concentration.
Right. So I heard you mention your experience earlier, which is awesome, but for instance, your editor-in-chief or whoever reviews your articles, are they in the industry longer, in the transportation industry? The person who actually reviews your writings, what kind of qualifications would that person have?
Definitely. So actually, I would say the majority, there's about 25-ish, 30 people on staff total that write for FreightWaves. I would say, honestly, at least 15 of them have been writing for transportation, or have been working in transportation, for at least three-ish decades. And that's why, I kind of laugh when I say I write about technology, because for a lot of them, it's like over their head. Like they're used to like just writing about deregulation in the 80s. So, that's part of it. Our senior editors, though, one of them, Kim, she's worked in this industry for her entire life. She worked right alongside, Brad Jacobs, actually, who runs XPO for a really long time. She's got really great insight, and she is just an editing connoisseur. I remember like my first week, I was like, I know you hate me, and I know you think my grammar sucks, but like I will get better, I promise. So she's very well versed, and she's able to like point out, I don't know if that's true. The big thing though is when we do write, we really try to put our sites, we cite as much as possible, right? Like if we're going to say something is true, we have to have, either a study or something behind it saying that it's true. That's across the board, and all of our editors very much like, there's been trust me, because I write like newsletters, and the newsletters like can be more of like my thoughts and opinions. But when I'm writing on the editorial side, if I even try to sneak in a thought, like let's say it was flatbeds are harder to load than reefers. No, that's your opinion. Cite a source for that, or we're taking it out. So they do a really good job of making sure that like if there's anything that's like on the cusp of a viewpoint compared to an actual truth, that there's some type of proof behind that before we just go out and publish it. And that makes me feel really good too, because then I know all the other stories have done the same thing. And when you're delivering news like Central having to close, like you want to know that the people behind it have that standard.
Absolutely. Thank you for explaining that.
Oh yeah.
Do you guys ever have to issue any retractions?
Oh yeah. Trying to think. I'm trying to think in my time if there's ever been retract. There's been like instances where maybe like a name was spelled wrong, or something was like phrased not quite right, and we've done like this has been edited type of things like that. But I'm trying to no, honestly, I think when it comes to maybe like hearing from lawyers or hearing from certain things, it's less of that's not true and more of who told you that. So it's rarely that if like we drop news like Central was a big one. We dropped when Covenant went bankrupt. We dropped that. The Suez Canal one. We were the first one to the Suez Canal, and I remember working that day, watching it come through the pipeline, and I was like, Kim, what happened? Like I remember seeing the pictures like coming through the processes, and I'm like, are you and we even had that story, I want to say, like an hour or two before it was even, we heard about it through Twitter. So we even did our due diligence before reporting that. Like, is this even happening? Calling over to Egypt and making sure all of that was correct. So no, I'd say if we've heard from lawyers or anything like that, it's usually because the truth was told and they're upset that they weren't in front of it. I will say though, and this comes even from our editor-in-chief, there's been times where I've wrote about actually some dealings with Omnitrax in the past, and while I was writing that, I waited at least a day or two trying to get each company to respond to what we've heard and what proof we have, and they really do push us. If we're doing articles like that, if we're accusing someone of doing something wrong or something isn't right, that we have all of our boxes checked. And I honestly think that's because so many of the people that are on staff have come from the Associated Press or from the Wall Street Journal or have worked in politics. And I think, honestly, like, the longer I'm in this, I'm starting to realize, like, you will make connections with people. Like, there's times where people tell me stuff in interviews, and even though I could maybe exploit it and write it in a certain way, I will openly tell them, like, for maybe like a couple hundred clicks, I'll openly tell them, like, I'm not going to write about this. Like, I know that you phrased it that way, but, like, I'm not going to put it out there that way because that's not true. I write about technology. If I had to write everything a technology told me they said they could do, I would be lying all day long. So there's plenty of times where, I'll get figures over and I'll have to, like, I'm not including that because that figure is almost nearly impossible.
Right.
So we have it's a fun teamwork when it comes to due diligence.
Right. And I'm sorry to keep pounding you with questions.
Oh no, you're
one
fine.
More. Yeah. I don't know if you can tell, but I used to write for my high school. I used to write actually for a lot. I love writing. It's
awesome.
One of my passions. So I'm very interested in you doing this is transportation. But I also have a question. I think I remember you saying that you all broke the news first about the Suez Canal, the whole container that got stuck there.
Yeah.
Is what I'm supposing.
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever, or has anyone in your staff, or you guys ever been invited firsthand to any of the major news networks? You know, usually when an article or a writer first breaks the news, they're invited onto one of the major networks to relay that information to the public. And I'm only asking because lately, as you can tell, transportation has been on the news more so than ever. So, and there's a lot of subject matter experts that's been invited onto major networks to explain their stories and their backgrounds. Has anyone from FreightWaves ever been invited on to discuss it?
You know, I've noticed recently there's definitely been an uptick of a number of our reporters being asked to do local news. So, like, maybe not like huge CNNs, but a lot of like the local newses who are like, why are so many stores not completely stocked, having our reporters reach out and do quick segments. Our founder and CEO, Craig Fuller, he's actually been on Bloomberg quite often over the last couple months, just discussing just in general a lot of the topics that we write about. And I want to say he was on Good Morning America too, like a couple of weeks ago. Oh, and then he was on Good Morning America. This is right. And then he actually ended up getting clipped, and he was on the Tonight or the Late Show with Noah. What's his name too? So,
Trevor.
Trevor Noah. Yes. Because I remember watching it and I was like, oh my God, that's my boss. I would say a lot of times when I do hear about these problems though, unfortunately, I don't even think Central made a lot of it. What was really cool though is we don't always get cited as being the first people to drop the news. And in this one in particular, and the same thing I think happened with Covenant, Wall Street Journal literally put in their article, we were the first ones to drop this. We were the first ones to figure out this is happening. So even though we might not be, asked to do legit interviews with them, they definitely have started to cite us recently. And, that's what our hope is that we keep covering this type of information, that we start building this reputation as the, nerve center of freight news. And you know what, Dee, I think the real problem is that just no one cared before, and people finally do care about not only when their stuff is going to get here, but where it comes from and that visibility portion of it. And I do a lot of writing on earnings reports, and it's the first time ever where usually in an earnings report from a company, right? The CEO might touch on No, rarely would they ever touch on shipping. The CFO might touch on shipping cost, but this is like the first time this last 2 years where like the first thing you hear out of a CEO during an earnings call is like whether or not our supply chain is good or not. And if it's not good, what's getting fixed? And if it is good, what we did fix in order to get to that point. So I think, over time you might start hearing from people more. And I think that you'll start seeing people spotlight FreightWaves hopefully even more. And I think it's going to take time. And I think what's really great about this moment is that people are starting to realize how much of an impact it is, right? Like, and I was really proud of us because I remember like one of my roommates from college reached out to me after the Suez Canal stuff, and she's like, NPR was talking about the canal this week, and I turned it off because you already told me everything about it. And it's like that made me feel good that it's like, okay, cool. I have friends that like could care less about this stuff who are paying attention. So just give it time, and people will start to see and start to realize like this is these guys are doing really great work.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for answering my questions, and thank you, Jory. I didn't mean to take over with the questions.
Oh, you all good. Grace, D is one of those folks I've worked with for years and years and years.
Oh, yay. D, listen, if I could give you any advice, if you know how to write and you understand this industry, there is so much work out there. It's like, I think that's the craziest thing I've learned, like, since I started doing this job, is how many huge companies, like, don't know how to market and write about this industry. So, I think I even saw a little bit like in your profile, but like make sure like on LinkedIn and everything that you put that you are a writer and that you can, speak on this industry, because I probably get a handful of requests a week, and it made me start to realize that not everyone is gifted. Like, you can't just find someone who can write and ask them to write about supply chain. It won't work. It has to be coming from someone who understands how supply chain works. So just think about that in the future. Maybe if you're on top of doing consulting, maybe you start doing freelance work and helping companies with their blog posts or their sales documents and marketing programs. So just something to consider.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you really opened my eyes. I didn't even think about writing and transportation.
No, it's insane. It's like to the point where I'm like, there's so much money on the table where I'm like, I don't even think at this point, like if I left FreightWaves, I don't think I'd go back into brokering, because there's so many different companies out there that are starting to realize that marketing has so much to do with the sales, and that even comes down to logistics as well. So always consider that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much, Grace.
All right. Well, I just want to say again, thank you so much for joining us this evening, Grace.
Yes.
I'm going to be here rooting for you. And, I definitely talked to my wife about you being, a bigger Beehive fan than she is.
Oh my God, It's so funny because I was just driving back to my house today and I thought to myself, I hope his wife is doing good, and I wonder if she got anything in this last Adidas drop. That was like,
you know what? I think she wants to, but she has not yet gotten any Ivy Park. She wants some so badly.
Yes.
So I think that might be a gift in the future.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but anyways, if you again, I'm so happy to have you, and if there's anything I can do to help, just let me know, guys. Next week, we're we might be doing one of those situations next week where we hear more from the members of the community to hear about what you got going on, like a plug yourself situation.
Nice.
So, be tuned in for that and be ready to share about your company. But outside of that, Grace, did you have any message that you wanted to say before we closed out?
Just that this market is like I said at the beginning, we're dealing with a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and every day a delivery is delivered on time. It just gets bigger and bigger. So be ready to scale. Don't be ready to fail. That's for sure.
Be ready to scale, not ready to fail. All right, I'm gonna take that.
All right, there we go.
All right. Well, look, y'all be blessed, and check us out Monday morning, 7:30 a.m., where we're also partnering with FreightWaves so that we can talk to the Sonar team. We do that every Monday. So yeah.
Finally, I'm so glad they started doing that. I was bothering them. Like, yes. I'm so happy that worked.
Yeah, me too. Me too, man. But yeah, everybody, y'all have a blessed evening, and look forward to talking to y'all on Monday. All right. Peace now.